40,000 years ago, in the frozen forests of Europe, two very different groups of humans came face to face for the first time. One had lived here for 300,000 years. The other had just arrived from Africa. What happened next would determine which species survived and which would vanish forever. This is the story of the most important encounter in human history. For decades, scientists believed Neanderthals were primitive brutes who couldn't compete with the smarter, more advanced Homo Sapiens. But recent discoveries have completely changed this story. New DNA evidence reveals something shocking. We didn't just meet them, we lived with them, we had children with them, and in some ways, we became them. Today, we're going to explore exactly what happened when these two species met, and I'm going to show you evidence that will change everything you thought you knew about human evolution. By the end of this video, you'll understand why 2 to 4% of your DNA comes from a species that went extinct 40,000 years ago. Let's go back to where it all began. Europe, 45,000 years ago. The planet is in the grip of an ice age. Temperatures average 20 degrees colder than today. Glaciers cover most of northern Europe. The landscape is a mix of frozen tundra and pine forests. And this harsh world belongs to the Neanderthals. They've lived here for 300,000 years. That's 15 times longer than modern civilization has existed. They've mastered this frozen continent. They know every hunting ground, every shelter, every source of water. They're not the primitive cavemen we once imagined. Neanderthals had brains slightly larger than ours. They made sophisticated tools. They controlled fire. They buried their dead with flowers and ceremonial objects, suggesting they had beliefs about an afterlife. They wore jewelry made from eagle talons and bear teeth. They created cave paintings. Some scientists even believed they had language. They were, by every measure, human, but they were about to meet competition unlike anything they'd faced before. Around 45,000 years ago, something unprecedented happened. A small group of Homo sapiens crossed into Europe from the Middle East. They'd spent the last 70,000 years migrating out of Africa, spreading across Asia, adapting to new environments. Now they'd reached Europe. These newcomers looked different from the Neanderthals. They were taller and more slender. Their faces were flatter, with prominent chins. They had darker skin, though it would lighten over thousands of years in Europe's dimmer sunlight. But the real differences weren't physical. Homo sapiens had developed something revolutionary: more complex social networks. While Neanderthals lived in small family groups of 15 to 30 individuals, sapiens could cooperate in groups of hundreds. They had more sophisticated communication, better long-range planning, more diverse toolkits, and perhaps most importantly, they were innovators. Where Neanderthals perfected their techniques over millennia, sapiens constantly experimented with new ideas. The stage was set for one of history's most consequential meetings. Imagine that first encounter. You're a Neanderthal hunter, checking your territory as you've done for decades. Your father hunted here, your grandfather hunted here. This land has belonged to your people for thousands of generations. And then you see them, the strangers, walking upright like you, but different. Their faces strange, their tools unfamiliar, their language incomprehensible. What would you feel? Fear, curiosity, anger at intruders in your hunting grounds? What we know from archaeological sites is this: sometimes these encounters were peaceful. We found caves where Neanderthal and Sapiens artifacts are mixed together, suggesting they shared spaces. But other times, the evidence points to violence. We've discovered Neanderthal remains with suspicious injuries. Some show signs of ambush, others suggest territorial conflicts. The truth is probably complex. Just like modern humans, different groups probably reacted differently. Some territories saw cooperation. Others saw competition. Some saw conflict. But here's what we know for certain happened. They didn't just coexist, they fell in love. This is where the story gets personal. Between 45 and 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals and Homo Sapiens didn't just meet. They formed relationships. They had children together. We know this because of groundbreaking DNA research. In 2010, scientists sequenced the Neanderthal genome, and they discovered something extraordinary. If you're of European, Asian, or Native American descent, approximately 2 to 4% of your DNA comes directly from Neanderthals. Let me say that again. You are part Neanderthal. This wasn't just one encounter. Genetic evidence suggests multiple waves of interbreeding over thousands of years. In different locations across Europe and Asia, these hybrid children survived. They thrived. They passed on their Neanderthal genes through countless generations, all the way down to you. Some of those genes are still active in your body today. Neanderthal DNA influences your immune system, your skin tone, your hair texture, your susceptibility to certain diseases, even your response to sunlight. There are Neanderthal genes that help you fight off viruses, others that affect how you feel pain, some that influence whether you're a morning person or night owl. In the most literal sense, Neanderthals aren't extinct. They live on in us. But here's the haunting question. If Neanderthals and Sapiens could interbreed, if they could cooperate, if Neanderthals were intelligent and adapted to Europe's climate, why did they disappear? Around 40,000 years ago, Neanderthal populations began declining rapidly. By 35,000 years ago, they were nearly gone. The last confirmed Neanderthal died in Gibraltar, Spain, around 37,000 years ago. For years, scientists debated why. Here are the leading theories. Theory 1, climate change. Around 40,000 years ago, temperatures fluctuated wildly. Perhaps Neanderthals, so specialized for cold climates, couldn't adapt fast enough. But this doesn't fully explain it. Neanderthals had survived multiple ice ages before. Theory 2, competition for resources. Homo sapiens had more efficient hunting techniques, better tools, wider trade networks. Maybe they simply outcompeted Neanderthals for food and territory. Evidence supports this. We found sapiens hunting sites with much higher success rates than comparable Neanderthal sites. Theory 3, demographics. Neanderthals had smaller populations living in isolated groups. Homo sapiens had larger social networks. When facing challenges like disease or food scarcity, larger populations have better odds of survival. Genetic studies suggest Neanderthals had very low genetic diversity, indicating small, isolated populations for thousands of years. This made them vulnerable. Theory 4, and this is the darkest possibility, direct violence. Did Homo sapiens actively hunt or displace Neanderthals? Some archaeological evidence suggests yes. We found Neanderthal remains with injuries consistent with weapons used by sapiens, sites where Neanderthals suddenly disappeared, only to be replaced by sapiens. But the truth is probably a combination of all these factors. Neanderthals faced climate challenges, resource competition, demographic disadvantages. and likely some direct conflict with sapiens. They were squeezed from every direction, and over a few thousand years, they faded into history. But Neanderthals left us more than just DNA. Recent discoveries show they left us culture too. The oldest cave paintings in Europe, once attributed to Homo sapiens, were actually made by Neanderthals. 65,000 years ago, they were creating art. 20,000 years before sapiens arrived in Europe, they made jewelry from eagle talons, carefully selected for symmetry and beauty. They cared for their sick and injured. We found skeletons of Neanderthals who survived years with devastating injuries that would have required constant care from their group. They had symbolic thought, abstract thinking, creativity, compassion. In other words, they had everything we consider uniquely human, and those traits didn't die with them. Modern humans living outside Africa owe part of their immune system to Neanderthal genes. During the COVID pandemic, scientists discovered that a cluster of genes inherited from Neanderthals influenced whether people had severe symptoms. Neanderthal genes help some people live at high altitudes. Others help process different diets. Some influence brain development. When you look in the mirror, you might see a bit of forehead structure inherited from Neanderthal ancestors, or a particular nose shape, or a stocky build optimized for cold climates. They're not gone, they're part of us. So what really happened when Neanderthals met Homo sapiens? The answer isn't simple. It's not a story of primitive cavemen defeated by superior humans. It's not a story of peaceful coexistence either. It's a story of two sophisticated human species meeting, competing, cooperating, falling in love, and ultimately merging. It's a story written in your DNA. Every time you catch a cold and recover, thank your Neanderthal immune genes. Every time you enjoy a sunset, remember that Neanderthals appreciated beauty too. Every time you care for someone who's sick, remember that compassion is an ancient human trait. 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens stood at a crossroads. One path led to a future where both species survived separately. The other led to a future where they became one. Evolution chose the second path. We are the result of that ancient meeting in Ice Age Europe. We are the descendants of both species. We carry forward the legacy of Neanderthals and sapiens alike. They're not extinct. They're us. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the deep past. If you found this fascinating, hit that subscribe button